We're going up and down, over and over. It's the same old thing. Up and down, over and under.
Awesome. Chris, man. Well, thank you for joining the show. Really excited to have you on this one.
I appreciate you having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah. So for people listening, Alex Harrison, I think his episode was number 23. It always amazes me my ability to forget when people were actually on the show. But Alex reached out to me right after and was like, hey, I've got someone that you have to have on the show. You got to talk to Chris Walsh. So, that's how you ended up here today. And I'm pumped to hear a little bit about your story.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I know Alex really well because he's been coaching me for a while now with strength conditioning. Super sharp guy.
Yeah.
I highly respect his opinion. So I've just stayed in touch with him just because we became pretty good friends through that relationship, which is awesome. It makes the coach athlete relationship. We're pretty close in age, so it's weird to be like coach athlete scenario, but
right.
Yeah, that's how I know him.
And did you guys actually overlap on the bobsled team?
So I got started the year of 2018, which is like when the games were happening. So that was the last season. I think he ended up getting injured that season, was what ended up making him miss the games, like a broken foot that he just couldn't come back from.
Right.
And he lived, like I was stationed up in Washington in the military, and
no kidding.
I saw him on Instagram, like doing a box jump, and I was like, this guy's on the bobsled team. I was like, oh, he's like an hour from me. I should reach out to him. And so from there, I just kind of grew and went out to his facility and talked to him, and he was willing to start coaching me and mentoring me in the sport, which was great. But we never actually competed at the same time. So.
Okay. And where were you stationed in Washington?
Out in Tacoma, joint base Lewis McCord. So.
Okay. Yep. I know it well. Yeah. Too funny. So people listening are probably like, this guy's just stacking the deck with people from Washington. And that's really not my intention. I had no idea that all these people coming on have that in their background. But so you're on bobsled. We could talk about that a lot. But what I find to be so interesting is that you're doing that while still actively being in the Air Force.
Yeah. So I've been in the Air Force for about 10, I guess almost 11 years now. And I didn't get involved in bobsled till, I don't know, my 9th and a half year, I would say.
Oh man. So how old were you when you got into bobsled?
I started when I was, I'd say 31. Yeah. So. Oh,
no kidding.
Yeah. So late into the sport. That's not uncommon. There are a lot of guys that come in their late 20s, early 30s. Just because it's kind of a second, third sport pursuit for people. And it's so niche that people you don't find it until kind of a weird stage of your life. That's how it works for me. And it's kind of the same for others. So,
awesome.
But yeah, so I did, I was in the Air Force and started out as like an aircraft maintenance officer. But then after a couple of years, I was really passionate about getting into special operations. So I went through our assessment selection process in the Air Force to join Air Force, now known as Air Force Special Warfare. Most people would know it as like combat control or special tactics. And so went through that pipeline. It took a couple of years to get through all that process. And I've been doing that since until like 2000, last September. Yeah, September of 19. I finally got into Air Force has an athlete program for people pursuing Olympic sports.
Wow.
So they let you go full time and start to just focus on preparation for that, which is huge. Because when I was doing both, like the job and trying to do bobsled, that was, that's tough. It's tough to kind of be successful in two realms like that. So.
Well, and not just like in the military, but in special forces.
Yeah. I mean, I deployed in the middle of in between seasons one time. And so I was still doing some training objectives like jumping and diving and doing all the stuff that the job requires. Not necessarily safe when you're trying to take care of your body for a sport that, because it's always a risk. You could break your leg on any jump, even if you do everything right. So it's just, I finally got out of that so I could focus solely on the sport and see if I can make the games. So.
Oh, right on. And for people who don't know, and I count myself in that camp, how does Special Forces in the Air Force differ from other special forces within like the military?
Yeah, so the umbrella term, I'm not trying to be like police on terminology, but
Okay, thank you.
Special Forces would be very specific. That's an Army only unit. So Army Green Berets, known as Special Forces. I don't expect anyone to know this, but
no, this is important.
Overarching, it's just Special Operations, which includes Navy SEALs, includes MARSOC or the Marine Corps' MARSOC units, and us. So
yeah.
I kind of got off topic, but what we do for that subject, or for what we do in that realm, is we are usually attached to Navy SEAL teams and Army Special Forces teams, and we provide kind of an air-to-ground integration piece, which can range from air traffic control. All the guys that I go through with are air traffic controllers, and I am as well. And then, or joint terminal attack control, which allows you to call in airstrikes in close proximity to friendly forces. That's one aspect of special warfare. Then we also have like the rescue side with our pararescue men who do kind of technical rescue. They can do extrication, where they cut guys out of cars or lift buildings, all sorts of wazoo stuff, high angle rescue. So it's kind of a force multiplier, I guess is the best way to describe it, where we add capabilities to those types of teams. So I threw a bunch of jargon at you, but yeah, that's.
No, I got it. Well, and I appreciate you keeping me honest on the special operations.
No, that's good. It's all good.
Well, very cool. So how many years now, or I guess now you're in the world-class athlete program,
correct,
right?
Yeah.
How long were you in the special operations leading up into that?
Let's see, I would have been like 7 years I was doing that.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Dang. So now I've got a bunch of questions. So I'm just going to start rattling them off.
It's all good.
So you're in special operations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, bobsled is a sport folks typically it's either like their second or third endeavor, or they find it an interesting point in their life. Like, how did you get exposed to the sport of bobsled?
So I remember watching the Olympics, and I think I remember seeing it like 2010, like way back then. Like I was like, bobsled, that's pretty cool. I'd be interested to know more about that.
Yeah.
Didn't pursue it at the time. Even though I was young and spry and probably should have, I had things I wanted to do in the military. And so I was very hard set to accomplish those goals. And then finally, after going through that, doing what I wanted in special operations, as much as I was able to do at that point, I was like, I got to go for it. I'm not getting any younger. Sports they have shelf lives. So
yeah.
So I was like, all right, I'm going to just go they do open combine. So I just went out and did the combine and went through their process and got to do some competitions the year of the Olympics in one of the lower level circuits.
Yeah.
They call that North America's Cup. So I did a couple 2-man races there.
Okay.
That went all right. And so then from there, I just continued through. They do like the team trial process every year.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been in the organization with them since then. But you never really know, if you're going to make the Olympics. That all depends on that year of the games. Everything leading up to it's important of the 4-year quad, but that Olympic year is going to depend on a lot of factors, like where are you ranked that season among the push athletes, and how many sleds did we as a nation get qualified for the Olympic Games? Because we could get as low as 1, as high as 3. That's always kind of changing. So that varies the amount of athletes that get a chance to go greatly. So
does that? We've had a couple Olympians on. So is it just similar to any other qualifying event? How many teams does America typically field in the qualifier?
So it's based off of how you do that season in the International Bobsled and Skeleton Federation's World Cup season.
Okay.
So it's really like a points amalgamation of a few different tours, how your sleds are ranked throughout the world, and then they have a cutoff line. Certain nations right now are allowed to get up to 3. That we're one of them.
Okay.
That rule may change, so I don't know if we're going to have the opportunity to put 3 sleds. We did in the last Olympic Games. Obviously, we want that because I guess that gets more push athletes in. But so that's how it works. It's all based on how you rank in the season. So it's paramount that you do really well as a team through the whole bobsled season before the Olympics happen. So
yeah. Huh. How many push athletes are there in the Team USA program at any given point?
Including the Devo program, the development level, you probably have somewhere between 25, somewhere up around 25, maybe a little more.
So there's a lot of guys gunning for those 4 to 12 spots.
Correct. Yeah. So it can be.
Man.
Yeah, it's a weird sport because it's a team sport in a lot of ways, but obviously you're competing and you live and die by your push times as a team, but you also are competing for that spot against your teammates all the time. So
Yeah.
you're never really safe, which is, I think is in some ways positive. It keeps you honest. No one ever can just kind of sit back and rest, because
Right.
every time you step up to push, if you do something wrong, you don't know, that could be, you could get moved off to another crew, or, you don't know what can happen. So, yeah.
So how are you measured as an individual athlete within the bobsled organization? So you said it depends on your push times. So are you guys periodically, I mean, I guess, being your times are being tested in an isolated fashion?
So we do exactly what you just said, the isolated testing or individual testing at the beginning of every year. And then based on, we call it individual push championships. And based on how that goes, is going to see like what drivers want you and on these crews and what combinations they want to see with other athletes. It really sets the stage for your whole season. So if you do poorly at the very beginning of the first event, like, it is very tough mountain to climb back onto the top 3 US sleds. So,
oh, wow. So, and then how are the sleds? Is it pretty intuitive the way that they're ranked 1, 2, 3? Like the 3 fastest pushers go with the top driver in sled 1, or is it kind of is there more strategy to kind of how they do that throughout the year?
you like the science would point to like times, lowest times equals the A plus B equals C type of scenario, but it's not always that way. Typically, sometimes, yes, sometimes it's the top 3 pushers are grouped up, but there is a chemistry aspect of the sport. So some crews, even though they have the fastest 3 dudes in the US at the time in bobsled, may not be the best crew. It's all up to how they work with that driver, how those guys work individually together, and can they do the different positions? Some guys just can't load from a certain side, and that might be the side they push fastest from. So it's not quite an exact science in that, like the 100 meters, like if you run it in 9.9 and you're faster than the guy that's 10.0, like you win. It's not quite that clean. And then the sled ranking is based on driver performance. So if he's driving really well that season, you guys could not push that great, but he's just on rails and doesn't makes any mistakes. So you finish well. So you could have a higher ranking. So there's a little bit more to it. It's not just like a straightforward all athletic based competition, which is cool.
Yeah. It's like, you can't just go solely off the results at the combine.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah. Have you guys had an opportunity to get in the sled much this year with everything that's going on between COVID and shutdowns and travel restrictions?
Yeah, normally we would have had a couple of camps up at the summer, up at the training center. We go to Lake Placid normally. That's where all the bobsled stuff is. So normally guys would be up there training together and working on combinations for guys, especially dudes who were there the last couple seasons. We already have an idea of kind of where everyone's at. But that hasn't been happening. Like the training centers are really locked down and restrictive on how you can get into them. And then the season is very up in the air. I'm not quite sure. Right now they're planning on going forward starting in September with the regular season, but they're going to make another decision in September based on, where the world is at, and is COVID in recession or, we don't know. So I don't know I don't even know where to guess. I think October is the earliest we'll see it happen, but it's purely speculation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we heard it here. Chris said October. So, I mean, so what does your training setup look like right now? Are you sticking to, and I know you said you're working with Alex, which I'm sure he's putting together great programming for you. Is it a lot of Olympic style lifting? Are you doing things that are specific to the bobsled?
Yeah.
And pushing?
Yeah, I would say I'm actually just got through injury recovery, so I'm just finally ramping back up, thankfully. But the training typically is like squats, sprints, Olympic lifts, and then plyometrics and just things. I would say it's like a mashing of track and field with football without really the need for any type of conditioning, because you're doing 1 rep for 40 meters, so you don't have to have a lot of
that sounds like heaven.
Yeah, for people who don't like cardio, it's like the best sport in the world.
Yeah.
But so that's that's really what it is a variation of all those exercises, you
Yeah.
know. And then,
What was the injury? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut
oh
you
yeah,
off.
no, yeah, and we do I do a bunch of sled pushing in there,
Oh,
but
okay.
it's very hard to replicate a bobsled without having like a bobsled or push track. Like, it's just not easy to do. So
Yeah, it's kind of what I was wondering. Like, I imagine there's all sorts of sleds you could get and
yeah,
different apparatus. But I feel like I don't know how you replicate sprinting on the ice and
yeah, you
something that
don't.
requires 3 other men to push
You
the
know,
sled.
like that's why it's so critical that we get some time in the summer to work together, because we have a dry land push track.
Ah, okay.
We're actually getting an indoor, they call it an ice house. So it's just a push area that's on ice to let us do all the reps without having to actually go down the hill on a bobsled. So
Oh,
you
cool.
can do it in the summer because it can stay, it's all enclosed when the track is not open in the summer. So that's a new thing we're getting added. That should be built this year, which is great. That's huge for us. But yeah, that's very hard to do in the off season without being at the training center. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So, one of the things that I'm just super interested to understand is like how, so I don't think we talked about this while we were recording, but like you're married with 2 kids, 2 young kids. So anyone who has kids knows that that's a little bit more
yeah,
challenging.
yes.
Like how were you balancing all 3 of those kind of critical responsibilities at one time?
Um, Looking back at it before I got into WCAP, I honestly do not know how it worked. Because my wife also works full time. Like, she works
Oh, no
for
kidding.
Boeing in their finance department, and so she's pretty involved there and has a pretty important role. So yeah, when we were in Washington, like at one point our squadron had deployed. I was on G series orders, which meant I was like the commander of the unit.
Ah, okay.
And we had the kids. So, I mean, mornings were like 5 a.m. We're up getting the kids ready to take them to daycare. I go drop them off at daycare. She goes north to Seattle to work at Boeing.
Right.
I get to work at like 7. I train from 7 to 9:30 if I'm lucky. And then I go to work all day and then pick them
Yeah.
up on the way home. It was very jam-packed days. It was not sustainable, but yeah, I do it mainly because, right, especially now, Karen is, if she wasn't who she was and able to, be an awesome mom and still maintain a professional career, I don't know if it'd be possible, because there's a lot of travel with bobsled. So when I leave for the seasons, she's solo at home dealing with the
Yeah.
2 youngins.
So, one of the things that I think people struggle with is feeling that there's not enough time in the day. You know what I mean? And then,
Yeah.
and then to hear someone like yourself who's fitting in training potentially at, already at a world-class level, but potentially an Olympic level. Right. And then something as demanding as, oh, don't let me mess it up again. I was going to say
That's
special
okay.
forces, special operations. Come on.
Yeah.
Within the Air Force. And then raising kids. I mean, like, is there anything that you have kind of done? Maybe it's like personal habits, scheduling, routine that understanding you probably felt like you were behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
But was there anything that you can kind of point to is like, what made that sustainable to an extent was X?
Yeah. I think the one thing I did was like, man, I cut out. There was just no frivolous things,
Yeah.
If it didn't progress in kind of one of my objectives or one of my goals or take care of the family, it just wasn't. I just didn't have time for it. And so, in some ways, that was kind of freeing, because it was like, hey, everything had a purpose, and though it was very busy, I never felt like I was just wasting time, which is cool.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's hard to get to that. I don't know. There were days I did it really well, and there were days I didn't do it well, and I just wanted to zone out. So the goal was always like, put everything in priority order. Like, get this family stuff knocked out, then I can have some time to take care of the guys at work and take care of my job, because those dudes are counting on me to do certain things.
Yeah.
And then I can worry about myself. And so that's kind of, there was this book I read when I went through military training that I'm a huge fan of, kind of try to live my life as philosophy, but it's called The Mission, the Men, and Me. And kind of the concept is, if you look at all problems, you base them around those things, like, hey, how does this relate to like what our mission is, or what our objectives are, or what our goals are? that's your first priorities of things to do. And then the men or the family, I think it doesn't have to be in this order exactly, but this is how the book is written.
Yeah.
Those are their next things, right? And then worry about yourself and your personal needs at the end. So I don't know. I think that is a really effective way of how I've managed things, or tried to. I can't say I've always done it right. No one does, but that's how I try to think about stuff. So
Yeah. What was that book called?
it's called The Mission, the Men and Me. It's by a guy named Pete Blaber. He was Delta Force commander at one point. So he did the invasion of Iraq. So it's a very fascinating book if you're just generally interested in leadership and stuff like that. So
yeah. No, that sounds great. And I'll make sure to include that in the show notes. So, for you, I guess, what was it that had you just kind of felt like from an athletic standpoint, there was kind of an itch that still just hadn't been scratched?
Yes.
Or was it okay?
That was it. I mean, I just had always wanted to take athletics as far as I possibly could. And I was just like, hey, I thought I had the capacity to be at that level, and I was like, do I really? And let's go. Like, I wasn't scared. One of the big things is, like, I was never scared of failure. Like, if I went up there and it doesn't work out, and if I don't make the 22 Olympics, I'll at least know, like, when I'm done with it all, like, hey, I gave everything I had and I saw exactly where I stacked up, and I can rest my head at night and know I didn't back down because I was scared that it might not work out the way I wanted it to. And so that was it. Like, I really was a big athlete growing up, and I was like, hey, I got to see if I have what it takes to be at that level. And so far I do, but that's always the question. Every day you go out there, it's always the question, do I have what it takes to be here? So,
yeah. And had that, it's funny, like, had you had any other aspirations? Like, had you not gotten into the sport of bobsled? Like, I know, well, maybe here's even a good question. Like, were you keeping yourself athletically at a really high level, throughout your 20s into your early 30s?
Yeah, I mean, special operations demands a high level of physical fitness. It's a little different. It's not so power based, but like, I was always doing that. I was usually trying to do like local CrossFit competitions, just things that were just to make it all interesting. But the job by itself is very demanding. So keeping myself prepared for that and trying to be the example for the guys that were on my team. So I always tried to be the fittest. That just helped me keep a very solid base to build out of. And I had college athletics to fall back onto. Like, I played college sports. And so that was, it's not like it was all completely foreign to me when I decided to go back into, sprinting and power sports. So.
Yeah. I saw that. So you went to Valparaiso, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And you played football?
I did. Yeah. And ran track and field there. So
nice. What position?
I started out as a safety and eventually worked myself into a wide receiver position.
Hey, there we go.
I was decently good at catching things, so they let me play slot. So
give you a chance on the other side of the ball.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. And then, so are you? It's funny because when talking to Alex, I was very surprised to hear that he did not consider himself to be someone who was particularly fast. At least in terms of like a traditional event, like 100-meter dash.
Yeah.
For you, I guess, where do your strengths lie, and kind of like how does that translate to what you're doing on the bobsled team?
Yeah, I would probably concur with Alex. I think him and I are when he was competing, we were probably very close in speed capability.
Okay.
Yeah. The thing about bobsled though is you're not just running, so you're pushing something heavy. So, I tend to be a decently strong person and decently powerful. So I think like a combination of those three aspects helps me be somewhat successful in the sport there. But by no means, if you were to line me up against every dude on the bobsled team, would I win the foot race? No, absolutely not. There's some guys who are just pure track dudes who are just very fast, but they may not squat as much. So there's like, that's why the team always, like I said before, is there's a kind of a certain guys complement each other depending on the position that they're in. So,
it's just such an interesting sport. It's one of those ones that I think like nationally, most people don't pay a whole lot of attention to it. But when the Olympics roll around, it's like all of a sudden everyone's an expert.
Well, it's the 400-meter dash of the or the 400 relay of the Olympics, right? It's like the last thing. 4-man bobsled is like how they finish out the Winter Games. So I think it's exciting. Like 4-man bobsled is hands down is one of the most exciting things I think you can watch. But
sure.
it's really hard if you don't have any concept of like what exactly, like how good are these guys at what they're doing. You know, it's like Olympics in general, like these niche sports that people don't pay attention to, and then they see them only the best competing at that level. You're like, nah, it doesn't look too hard. You know, if you put if you put like a 4-man group of guys that were like a local bar out there, you'd be like, oh, I see. There's a big difference. So, but yeah, I like it a lot. I think I wish it had more kind of fame than it does, just for the sake of the sport, because it doesn't get the support and funding like other sports do. But it is. I think it's exciting. But the Winter Olympics in general is just, it's all the dangerous things that people are like, we want to watch, but we don't pay attention to. Yeah,
exactly. It's such a blast. Well, and I'd be interested to understand too, how does this world-class athlete program work? I actually wasn't aware of this prior to you coming on the show.
Yeah. So the Army has a program too.
Oh, okay.
Which there's a lot of details on how they work, but the basic concept is I get to maintain my position in the military and my rank and my pay, and I get some support from the Air Force to do traveling as needed. And just then I focus on competition. And then there's some requirements like, hey, I've got to, obviously maintain my grooming standards and like not cut my hair, and I can't just go completely native, but
can't just be rocking the stash.
Yeah.
Down the hill.
But it's pretty cool. And so in exchange, the Air Force and the Army get to say, okay, look, we've got people that do amazing things, not just amazing things that are on the battlefield or doing humanitarian support or whatever else. And the underlying piece of it, the fine print, I suppose, is I owe time back to the military for being in the program. So that's really where there's the fine print that people don't know. Is like, oh, you get to do this cool thing, but I will have to continue to serve after it. I don't get to just be like, thanks, that was fun, I'm going to go now. So there's that aspect of it. So,
I mean, I don't expect you to know this off the top of your head, but like, how many people are in this program? Like, is there a sizable amount of folks who serve, who are potential like Olympic level athletes?
Yes, I would. In the Air Force, it's pretty small. Air Force is like, I don't know, 30 guys and gals.
Oh, but there's 30. Wow.
Yeah, and the entire Air Force. So very, very small program. The Army, I think, has a couple hundred maybe. But still small when you look at the big picture of how big the Army is. But it's a pretty small program.
And it's so interesting because, like you said, like being in special operations, I think most people probably assume that you're like in, top physical shape.
Yeah.
But the demands of what you're probably asked to do in special operations compared to something that's like, you said so explosive and such like, only a couple seconds worth of sprinting and pushing, like the demands are probably so different.
Absolutely.
It's really cool to hear that like you've kind of been able to do both up to this point.
Yeah. I mean, luckily now being in WCAP, I don't have those requirements levied on me the same way. But when I was doing both, like, for example, our fitness test for the special operations career field was a 3-mile run, a minute of push-ups, 4 minutes of sit-ups, 2 minutes of push-ups, a minute of pull-ups, 4 minutes of sit-ups, and then a 1,500-meter surface swim, right? And I'm doing that, staying fit enough to do that, and then also run as fast as you can for 45 meters,
right?
At a world-class level. Those are very divergent level efforts. So I needed to be able to break away from the other thing because, it just you can't. The body wasn't designed to be at the top level of both of those types of spectrums. So
you need to be able to start specializing.
Yeah, I mean, CrossFit it'd be good. Like you can be a little bit of both, and it's helpful for that sport. But it's just not. I couldn't be a good bobsledder and be a good special operator.
Well, and it's interesting to me that you bring up CrossFit because kind of as I've talked to you and I've talked to Alex, it sounds like neither of you have said like, no, I can just flat out fly. and I'm super explosive. You're both like, no, I'm pretty fast, but I'm really powerful. I'm really strong. It kind of almost sounds like you have some of the same qualities that make some of these folks like elite at CrossFit.
Yeah, it's funny because we actually have a guy on the team who was elite at CrossFit. A guy named Blaine McConnell, 6th at the CrossFit Games in 2016.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so quite an athlete. The dude, I think he just cleaned 200 kilos while we were in Canada this past season. So, like, he's probably one of the, I would say he's an outlier. I don't think most guys are like that, but he if you asked him right now, could he do CrossFit? He would be like, absolutely not.
Really?
He's just like, I'm not. They're so different. You can't prepare like that and do that type of training and be as good as you want to be at bobsledding. So,
yeah. Oh, man. So, for you, did you always anticipate to go into the service? Because you went to college, you played sports. Was it something that you always wanted?
It was. I actually grew up in both my folks were in the military. I was born on a military base overseas, and so it was just something that I wanted to do. And then, when I was in high school, I was very much shaped by September 11th, and I remember all that stuff happening. So I had kind of in my mind that I was going that route for at least a little while. And so I was anticipating separating from the military for a while, but then got into bobsled, and WCAP is like the best way to do that and still have a paycheck and support a family. So that kept me around for a little bit longer probably than I was anticipating, but it's been positive. Like I'm not, no complaints at all. So,
yeah. Have you, and I know you're laser focused on bobsledding right now, and being a part of that program is enabling you to do that. Have you thought at all about what you would like to do afterwards?
That's a great, right now,
like, come on, man. I just want to talk about bobsledding. I know
I've got to go back to, I've got to go back to special operations. So that is something I will have to do afterwards, for sure. So there's at least a few years of that. Beyond that, I have not thought that far ahead. I probably should, but right now it's just, I got enough in the 5 to 10 meter area to worry about that. That's keeping me pretty busy.
It's funny. I have a couple buddies who are doing different things in athletics, and they're like, you know what, man, like I see you guys, like you're building a life, you have stability. Like maybe I just like hang it up. And I'm like, dude, it's not that sweet.
Yeah.
Like stay as long as you can.
Never leave.
Yeah, exactly. So something that I think people will probably be a little surprised to hear is that as we're talking right now, you are sitting in a race car simulator.
Yes, I am. I would say I'm a bit of a speed freak. Like I have a super need for speed. Can you tell people a little bit about, your racing background would be really interesting, but can you talk a little bit about what you've been doing recently with regards to the simulator and some of the things that kind of dovetailed off that? Yeah. So the simulator is really just a continuation of like my love of racing. So I was racing when I was in Washington. I raced super bikes in the Washington Road Racing Association up there, which was really cool. Did that for a few years. Got injured. Decided I couldn't make that live with sports. So I gave that up. And in an effort to continue to scratch the itch of racing, I got into the sim thing through iRacing. It was actually an ex-teammate, a guy named Greg West, who kind of got me into it. He works for them now. And I just was like, oh my God, this is definitely filling the need. Got decently good at it. Like I do some of the pro esports series, and I have some broadcasts that I've been on where I've raced against some pretty high level guys and some actual factory drivers. So that's been pretty cool to do that.
What type of racing?
So I usually race like Porsche cars. So it's like GT style racing, like road courses and stuff like that. Like,
cool.
Yeah. So, and then I naturally, like I do with anything, I'm like, this isn't enough. I need to take it to the next level. And so I did it. I got into a real car a couple weekends ago and did that 14-hour endurance race with Champ Car. So,
okay. Maybe that's where we go next. What does a 14-hour race entail? And I guess where did you do it?
So Charlotte Motor Speedway, which is normally like a NASCAR track, has an infield area that's a road course.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. So the 14-hour race, you have a team of drivers, and you'll drive the same car, and you guys just, when you come in, I was driving about 2 hours at a time. I did two stints. That's what they call your time in the car. And yeah, so you do that, you switch out drivers and you come in for gas, and then there's some strategy involved. A lot of it is getting the car to the end, especially at my level. At the very high level, it's all about pace. But yeah, I mean, purely based on my time in the sim, I was able to go out there my first time and set the fastest lap on the team and second fastest in our class.
Really?
So that was kind of cool. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. We ended up taking third in that race in our class and fifth overall. So it was a good time.
That's awesome. Is it kind of like, what was the movie? Is it Ford versus Ferrari?
Yes, exactly.
It's like that?
It's exactly like that. Not as like, as big as 24-hour Le Mans, but
right.
that's like the Olympics of racing probably. But yeah, it's like
same concept. Man, I can't believe that they pull that off on the interior of Charlotte Speedway.
Yeah.
So that's got to be.
I have some video. I'll send it to you after this. You can see what the onboard looks like.
Yeah, man, send that. Well, I'll put it in the show notes too. People will get a kick out of it. But I mean, for 14 hours, and if you said 2-hour stints at a time.
Yeah.
Roughly, if it's in that tight of a space, I mean, that's got to be like a lot of turns, a lot of constant engagement. Like, how do you stay that focused over the course of 2 hours?
I think racing, for me, it's just like, I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
I think if my dream job, if you ask me, like, would you give up every other thing in your life to go race cars? I might probably sign on the dotted line for that. But, yeah, it's pretty engaging because obviously the speeds and the consequences of making mistakes keeps you locked in. But yeah, you do have to. I mean, it is a mental challenge because it's easy to go out there and just drive the car around the track. That's not hard. What's hard is going out there and driving the car around the track at 80 to 85% of your best lap time every lap for 2 hours. That's because you win and lose races after tenths of seconds. They add up over a duration of 14 hours. So you've got to stay on it. And so that's something that you have to keep reminding yourself, like, hey, don't back off the pace. The way I always did it, I like the data. So I'd have the pit crew chief guy. Like, I'd talk to him on the radio a lot and be like, hey, what's my lap time? Okay, cool. I know if I fell off a little bit, and what's the gap between me and the next guy? That kind of helps me. Passing people always helps you stay engaged. So yeah.
So they're able to give you just constant feedback.
Yeah, if you want it. Some guys like to just drive and not hear a thing, but I like to talk. So
yeah, I would think so. Like, I would constantly want that kind of like information, understand like where am I against like my projected time, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So does that kind of trickle over into like everything you do in terms of like, and now Alex is bleeding into my interview because he was the mad scientist who dissects everything.
Yeah.
Are you similar in that way, or do you take a little bit of a different approach?
Yeah, I guess I do. I think everything is, what's the saying? The way you do anything is the way you do everything. So
yeah, I love that.
I like to take that approach. I think that's kind of how it is. Like, if I'm going to do something, I want to do it as fast as I can, the best I can, and try to repeat the results as many times as possible. And so racing is like, that is endurance racing is what it's all about. That's exactly what it is. And so for me, like, the challenge of staying so engaged to be able to go out there and do that over and over and over again and try to even best myself every time is like, just that process, separated from the results of the race, is just as rewarding. So I don't know. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. What does your wife think of all this? She's like, look, the bobsledding. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
14-hour endurance races. Like, come on.
It's just racing. I don't know.
She just knows.
She just knows. It's like, it's just, I'm going to do it. It's just like, she knows once I get my mind into something, like, it's just, she's like, he's going to do it. It's just there's no turning it back. So, it's expensive. So that's not, she's a finance person, so she doesn't always like that aspect of it. But, yeah, she knows, despite like my need for speed, I always approach things like I take it seriously and I prepare. So it's not like I'm out there trying to be kind of reckless. Like, I'm going to go and be ready and do my best and I don't want to crash the car, and I want to come back on the other side. So she knows that I'll be ready, and I'll do the right things to get through the race safely as well. So that's really the big thing. As long as I'm safe and she's not too concerned.
So how many are endurance races similar to this one that you did in Charlotte are there happening like in the US? Like, is there a whole circuit?
Yeah,
like
I'm actually running another one here in August. It's a 24 hour. So we're going to do.
Really?
Yeah. It's kind of exactly like Le Mans style. It's up in Virginia. Same car, same team. And we're going to run the car for 24 hours. So
right on. How many, is it the same type of pacing where you would do like 2-hour stints, or do you like change it up because it's a longer race?
Yeah, it'll kind of depend how the race progresses. We'll probably start out at 2 hours, and then depending how some drivers are feeling or how they're driving, and if like the nighttime is a tough time for some people to drive. Like some people just don't like it. Some drivers aren't a fan. Charlotte was easy because it's a big stadium, so there's a lot of lights. So you almost don't even need headlights because it's just so much ambient lighting.
So well lit, yeah.
But in Virginia, it is just pitch black out on the course in certain sections. So, you don't back off your pace. You're still going to go 140, 150 miles an hour in some sections, and you can't slow down because you're racing. So, some guys isn't as easy for them to cope with that aspect. So we could change the lineup and timing up a little bit based on that. But yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, for you, I guess, because like everything, it's individualized. Like, what's the most challenging part of an endurance race like that? Is it mental fatigue? Is it physical fatigue? Is it?
I think the biggest thing for people who are like competitive is realizing it's a 24-hour race. It's not 50 minutes or it's not this many laps. So being like, hey, I need to dial back my pace, or if someone gets close and you want to race them for a while, like you could make a mistake in that period and break the car, and the whole team's counting on you. It's not just you either. So if you mess the car up, everyone loses, not just you. So it's kind of being mature and saying, hey, I need to maintain my pace, and if I can go with them and not make a mistake, great. If I can't, I got to let people pass me that may have just be going fast. That driver just might be faster on that stint, or who knows. So I think there's a maturity aspect, and so that's tough because you want to race and you're like, hey, I want to be first. Sometimes you got to step back and realize it's a marathon, not a sprint, is the way I'd phrase it. So
yeah. Well, it's funny. I mean, it's kind of similar to, okay, now I'm talking about something I have no concept, but like similar to bobsled, right? I mean, you're just, again, an individual within a team.
Exactly.
But it's a little bit atypical from the traditional team because you're also competing with everyone. So yeah. Would you, long term, is the endurance racing something that like you could see yourself doing, especially once bobsledding's over? Do you have aspirations for other forms of racing?
I honestly, it's all going to come down to support and financing, but if I could take racing, to a professional level, I absolutely would. And that's if I was just kind of write down a dream sheet, like I'd like to get out of bobsledding and pursue racing pretty heavily. Obviously, I don't know what that looks like yet, but I enjoy it a lot, and I know that I could do it every day and it wouldn't get old, at least right now. So we'll see.
So what's the setup with, I guess, what kind of car do you guys drive in this endurance race?
We have a Nissan 350Z that we're driving. So it's a little older. The cars in this series are a little older and a little bit more, have more character, I guess is the best way to describe it. I'm not driving like the newest, hottest thing, but like racing is very much like, especially auto racing it's a money thing. Like you can compete in it in some cases and not necessarily be the most talented because you can afford to. And some people get there based on talent. So there's a few paths into the pro level. I don't quite know exactly how it works because I'm not there yet, but I've talked to some guys who do it at that level. And so it's just going to depend, We'll see.
So for this car that you guys have now, is this something that you're like, you keep talking about the finances and I think everyone can probably imagine there's probably a lot of finance in terms of upkeep, parts, travel. Is that something that you do with the other three drivers, or are you driving for a team that has some sort of like sponsorship and funding behind it? How does that piece of it work?
Yeah. This is mostly self-funded. So the way it works with this team is I pay for my time in that seat. I don't own the car. I don't want to own the car. It's just I don't have the time to maintain it. But the guy who owns it,
That's finance 101.
yeah,
Appreciating assets. I know your wife's
yeah.
all over it.
So I pay to drive, and you know, ideally getting to a point where I don't pay and people want me to drive for them would be great. But for now,
Yeah.
that's the way it works. And there's a couple guys on the team that own the team who own the car, and
Okay.
they're mechanics on Nissan. So it's really nice because they know everything about it inside and out. So, and then they get the car and transport everything, and I just purely show up. I'm handy. I know how to work on cars, but I don't. That's not my role. I'm there mainly to drive and help out with other team things. So
Yeah. Oh, right on. Man, that's so cool. I had no idea that races like that actually took place within the States, let alone like there's full-blown circuits.
there's a lot of like really good tracks in the US. It's just not as popular, I guess, as like NASCAR. NASCAR is pretty well known. The road racing world is much more like a European central thing. Yeah. So
yeah, that's exactly what I think of.
Yeah.
Okay. Stand corrected. I learned something every show. So cool. So, you know, actually, I think something that would be interesting to dive into, we haven't talked about this in a little while, but for someone who's accomplished in, you know, multiple facets of their life, I guess, you know, fatherhood, how do you approach that? Right. Because you kind of have this like really strong military background. You're a leader of men. And then, you know, you have 2 daughters at home who probably don't respond to the same sort of like feedback loop.
Yeah, that has been a challenge. Like raising kids, in a lot of ways, you know, leadership. Like if you're doing leadership right, it's almost like raising kids because you want to see them be successful and you want them to do the right things and you care about them and if you're taking care of them and you're trying to guide them towards those directions. Obviously in the military, I have mechanisms that give me some authority to do certain things and keep people in line. Not as easy. It's a much more like, it's less defined in the parenthood world, but, you know,
they can talk back.
It's honestly been a huge blessing because like having little girls and them kind of teaching me a little bit more about patience and understanding that there's a few different ways to kind of get your message across and it doesn't always have to be, you know, a forceful or aggressive way, I think that's been a huge blessing. And so I you know, a lot of people ask me like, did you want a boy? And I'm like, no, I am such a happy girl dad. You know, maybe if we have a third kid, yeah, that would be great. But I wouldn't trade it for the world. So that I've approached fatherhood in like, one, I don't know what I'm doing. And
that's a good place to start.
My biggest thing is just like, you know, try to teach them the things that I didn't learn as a kid, or I wish I had known. I mean, they're so young still that just the basics right now is like, let's go to the bathroom and not mess up our clothes.
Yeah, exactly.
That is a big win. So, but other than that, it's kind of like once they hit the 5-year-old age, you start to see that, hey, some of those like things start to take place, like where some of the lessons start to sink in and you see the behaviors that you want to see in them or you don't. And then that's when you can kind of respond. Like when they're down in the 3s, like you could do anything. Whatever they're going to want to do, they're going to do. So that's a tough age, but
you're just trying to corral them.
Yeah.
You're just trying to like keep them within a safe space.
Exactly. Safety is like probably first concern. So yeah, my daughter, my 5-year-old daughter, she's the one thing I'd say that I always am amazed by her is just kind of how thoughtful she is. Like she just like wants to do things for people just because she wants to do them because she cares about them. And I was like, those are lessons that we kind of lose as adults. And I'm like, oh, you know what? That was just a nice thing to do. And I don't expect anything from it. She never does. And so she gets the gratification of knowing that like she made somebody's moment or day. And so that's something I was like, oh, I should probably try to practice that a little bit more often.
I can relate to that. So, you know, our daughter is the oldest and then we've got 2 little boys. Our middle one is just, a savage. So we'll see. We'll see what he turns out to be like. He is just an animal in so many ways. He kills me. But yeah, no, same thing. Like when I had my daughter, of course, I got asked all the same questions. It's like, oh, well, don't you want a boy next? And it's like, you know what? Like having a girl is so awesome that if I had nothing but daughters, like I would just be as happy as could be. So I can relate to you. But yeah, just so thoughtful. Like I wish I could remember just some of the things. She'll come downstairs. I'm usually the first one up, and I'm either working out or I don't know, enjoying like a moment of solitude. Yeah. And she'll just come down and be like, you know, I got up early because I was thinking about you and I had a dream and I really just wanted to give you this. And it's like some makeshift present of something that she destroyed and then put back together for me. And I'm just like, oh, yeah. I'm like, thank you.
Exactly.
My whole day is just made. So and you were kind of talking about this a little bit. Has that impacted your leadership style within the military?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely has. It's definitely that just kind of teaching me to be, hey, like think about like what does that person need today that's not necessarily something I'm thinking of, you know, because like my day is I'm on a different trajectory today than they might be, and I don't really know what that is. And then, you know, the opposite side of the sweetness is like there is a very stubborn, I don't want to say demon side, but man, they can be stubborn. And the patience aspect has taught me some patience, because you just can't, once they get like in that stubborn mode, you can't break through. There's no forcing your way through that moment. So kind of learning to be like, hey, they're in a tough spot. I need to just be patient and help them through this. I don't necessarily need to fight fire with fire here. That has been a big fatherhood lesson, I think, that has bled over into other parts of my life.
Now, if you would have told me that after having kids, you resented all the guys who reported to you who did not have kids and complained about being tired, I would have completely understood that too. When I talk to someone at work and they're like, oh, dude, I'm so wiped. I was out late last night. We were partying and I'm like, dude, I haven't slept in days. And my wife hasn't slept in days. So no one's happy in this house right now. I'm like, the things you could accomplish, you lazy SOB.
I just want to go back to my 21-year-old self and be like, look at what your life's going to be like in about 10 years. Yeah. And be like, oh man, you have so much free time. Go do something else. Like go, I don't know, I could have wrote like 3 books if I was like focused on that stuff. Not to say I would have, but I could have.
Go start Amazon. Like do something. You have so much time. You could be a borderline superhero at this point. Yeah. Oh, I think about that. I think about that all the time. Yeah. I don't know what I was doing. And now I'm trying to cram it all in and accomplish things with 3 kids. So go figure.
That's life.
That is life. Oh man. Well, Chris, man, this has been awesome. I'm so blown away. I did not even take into consideration the fact that you had like the car racing on top of all of this. So how you're getting any of that done, I have no clue. But hey, for people who want to follow along, where's the best place for them to find you? I'm the only place I'm really active social media wise is Instagram. So I think my handle is like walsh.usa. If you search Chris Walsh, you'll see a picture of like me bobsledding. So right on. But that's really, I post on there. I'm not super I don't post every day, but my story, I guess I keep up to date. I don't know. It's not a huge priority for me, but it's because you're actually getting stuff done.
But I keep it relatively up to date. So
Oh, right on, man. Oh, and actually I meant to ask you this. You said you're recovering from an injury?
Oh yeah. So last season, one of the downsides, this is kind of ties back to special operations. One of the downsides is they make you, I don't want to say I'm the toughest dude in the world because I'm not, but they teach you to kind of push through pain. So all last year I was dealing with like what I thought was tendonitis. I ended up deciding like to the point where I couldn't like stand up do one-legged step-ups on my right leg. And I was like, I've got to go see what's up because this is clearly, I can't fix this with Advil and stretching. So I went and got an MRI done, and I had like a small tear in my quad tendon at the base right above the top of my knee. So I was like doing a lot of my pushing that year with a knee like that. Which is unfortunate, but hey, I'm glad I found it out and, I have some time to get healthy. COVID is been kind of a silver lining there is that it's delaying things. So it gave me some time to kind of get my body back in a good place. So
yeah. And how are you feeling?
I'm good. I actually kind of just did a decently heavy set of cleans for triples yesterday, and no pain. So that's what I'm all about right now, is like doing exercises I did before, pain free. So I got 2 more years to not survive, but excel and continue to push myself to another level. And I can't do it if I'm in pain, because it's just very hampering. So.
You know what's funny? Because I'm 33, and I think about this all the time. I've got a bunch of like strength and conditioning goals that I'm working on. I'm going to try and break a world record here next Friday.
Awesome.
Actually, when this comes out, it might already be done. And I just tipped my hand as to how long it takes me to get these edited for the listeners. But no, it's kind of to your point, right? I think all the time it's like I just need to like live to fight another day.
Yeah.
Like even if that means I got to dial it back a little bit, or I got to take an extra rest day, it's like that's so much better than getting injured and being set back months.
Yeah.
So I'm with you there.
Yeah, I think that's just it's one of those things where you don't want to admit that you're getting older, but one of the plus sides of age is you get a little bit wiser, you do things a little smarter. And I'm like, I don't need to train and crush myself to still get the benefits that I need, like every single day, right? Like you can do it a lot smarter. And that's something I honestly had to learn the hard way this time. But now I'm like, okay, I got to take like my health being at 100% versus trying to operate at 70% and push to 100%. There's just not, that doesn't work. That equation never pans out. So better to be healthy and dial training back a little bit than to turn training up so high that you can't keep your body operating at its optimal. You just gotta be able to dial it back. One of the first episodes we did was about I'm trying to remember now who it was even on, but it was like the revelation of a deload. Yeah. And I had plenty of tales to tell about being an idiot and just like constantly trying to blow it out every time you go in. If you asked Alex about how it went with me for the first, 6 to 7 months, he was probably like, he didn't know what a deload week was. Because I was like, I feel really good. I'm going to go in and max out on cleans today. And I was like, no, dude, just calm down. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'll be fine. I wish I had listened, but that's one of, I got a little older. I got a little wiser. Wisdom. Awesome. And then really quick before we go, I know I said we were going, but now I got a bunch of questions again. I got time. But how did your quad require like surgery, or was it just rest? No. So we did PRP to just aid in the healing, and took more time off than I was comfortable with. It was like one of the hardest things I think was just, hey, you need to just do nothing for your legs for an amount of time that's going to feel very uncomfortable. And it was, but I had to that was the maturity aspect. I was like, I got to be mature here, and I've got to get healthy. Luckily I could still do upper body stuff and stay active, so it wasn't completely at a loss. And then I got a lot of time to work on my sim racing. So I guess, silver lining, complementing each other somehow. But yeah, PRP, no surgery needed. Surgery would have been probably, that would have put me out for the year, because they said if they did surgery on that specific injury, it was like 8 months to recover at minimum. So that would have been rough. So luckily they're like, hey, if PRP works and you take it off and you take your time, that was a motivator too, is like, take your time, let everything heal. You can avoid a surgical intervention here, and then bounce back a little faster. So. And for people who don't know, and I'm going to count myself in that category, what is PRP? Yeah, I'm gonna Google it while we sit here, so I don't say anything. That's okay. This whole podcast is mostly filled with hearsay and half truths. So it's platelet-rich plasma. I just couldn't remember what. So what they do is they draw your blood, they put it in a centrifuge, separate the platelets, and then I'll tell you, it was more painful than the injury, because they shove all that fluid into that space. To kind of, if the concept is like, hey, get the human body to do what it does, have a big reaction to healing that area. So by forcing fluid into it, it kind of makes it feel like, oh, we got an injury here, let's go fix it. And just the amount of pressure and stuff that's in the joint is very, very uncomfortable. That's not even the worst place. Like the knees, probably for me, I probably have the least of it. I know guys who've got it like in their like groins and in their hips, and like they have to put these huge needles in, and they're just like, so I consider myself lucky in the big scheme of things.
How long did you actually have to get like the PRP treatments for?
I only did one. We were going to do a second one if I needed to, but luckily it seemed to have it seemed to work pretty well.
Wow.
I'm still doing physical therapy on top of training, but that's just more to keep me from getting into recessing too much. But yeah, it's been I was very skeptical. I was like, this might work, but I give it like, I don't know, 40% chance at best. But luckily, you know, I had some good people I was working with, so that helped a lot.
And it worked.
Yeah. So far, I mean, I'm just going to keep working on getting healthy and continuing to build slowly. I'm not going to go out and try to run my best 40 meter next week or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Oh, awesome. Well, Chris, man, this has been great. I appreciate you joining. I know people are going to take a lot away from this one.
I appreciate you having me on. It's just awesome to talk about it, and this is a pretty great forum. So
yeah, man. Hey, and for people who actually want to be able to watch you guys compete, I know that this upcoming season's kind of in jeopardy, but as you start gearing up for the Olympics, like what are like the notable events that maybe people can try and tune in and watch?
Yeah. So if you go on YouTube and search IBSF, or International Bobsled Skeleton Federation, they do like live broadcasts on there. I think there's a guy named Martin Haven who does the announcing, who also does Formula One, I want to say. So
right on.
Like pretty good. They have a pretty good production quality. So definitely worth watching. They do all the World Cup races.
Cool.
And then in-person stuff that's going to happen in the US. Pretty cool. This year we're having World Championships here in Lake Placid in February. So
awesome.
That's kind of like a mini Olympic Games they do at the end of every bobsled season. So it's nice to have it back in the U.S., and that'll be the last one before the Olympics. So we're kind of fortunate that it rolled through Lake Placid right before the Olympic season. So
Oh, that's awesome. All right, cool. Well, I'll link to all of that.
Yeah, thanks for having me.